Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast with your host, Emmett Muckles.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast. And today is a wonderful day. You know, I have a reoccurring guest on the show, Elliot, Katz. And we were talking about relationships some time ago. So if you remember that, and if you don't remember it, please go get his book, Be the Strong Man a Woman Wants You to Be. Did I say that right, Elliot?
Well, it's being the strong man a woman wants, timeless wisdom on being a man, but that's the message. We gotta change the men of the world so there's less divorce, less kids from broken homes. It's less confusion among men what they're supposed to be. That's the mission here.
Yeah, and how this came about is because I've been really looking at the landscape, and I've been looking at, younger women, I'd say under the age of like 31 versus women who are over the age of 40. And there seems to be these two different kind of ideologies where there's a group, and one of my daughters is in that group. And she just got married, but she still has this man-hater kind of thing happening. And it seems like there are a lot of men who are being thrown under the bus. So, and my take on it is this. You could be the person who cures poverty and cancer, but your works will be negated if you have an infidelity, or if the perception of if you do something wrong, if you molest someone or something like that, I understand. But an accusation can literally derail someone. That's one aspect I was looking at it. And also, I was just trying to understand for myself, and I actually spoke with my daughter about it, and she was like, Daddy, the reason why you really don't understand is because you're not that guy. And I was like, yeah, but it's still not making a lot of sense to me, because I see gentlemen now who are really tiptoeing around women. I see it in the workplace. I see it in social circumstances. And that sends a very different message than I see when I see people who actually are couples, because women are saying, like you said, I want a strong man. I want a man. And I'm slowly digesting this. So what is your take on, these recent things where these allegations are coming out? I mean, like when Morgan Freeman had allegations placed upon him, that kind of freaked me out.
You've hit the nail right on the head, because this is an issue that is really, the big issue now. Men hear all this stuff about toxic masculinity, about being controlling, being abusive, and the men I know, they're not toxic. They're not abusive. They want to be good husbands. They want to be good fathers. They want to be good boyfriends. But they're so afraid. It's exactly the word you use. They're tiptoeing around this situation. They're so afraid of being accused of being controlling or toxic.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do. So they feel I'll just tiptoe gently around this woman. I'll be careful not to say anything that might be interpreted as controlling. Even to the point of I couldn't count the number of single women who will say a man asks them out and can't even choose a place for a cup of coffee because he's so afraid of being accused of being controlling. Right? You're laughing, but it's true. I've had lots of women tell me this, but to the woman, she sees it as well. You asked me out, you can't even take the time to think about where we could go. And, when you make the effort to say, I think we would enjoy going to this place or that place, it shows, hey, I think you're special. I put the effort into, making a plan, and makes her feel special. But to the man, he says, well, I'm showing I'm the nicest guy in the world. But, I'll let her make all the decisions. And he can't understand why she's so frustrated, because to have to make all the decisions and just saying, choosing a place for a cup of coffee isn't a major decision, but does she want to marry a man who will never make any decisions, who will just leave any problem that comes up? He'll say, oh, well, what do you think we should do? And thinking I'm this nice guy, I'm not being controlling, but you're leaving all these responsibilities to her. So this is exactly the situation. Men are so afraid, they're tiptoeing around, And the men think, well, I'm such a nice guy. Why aren't women interested in me? I heard this story recently about this woman told me she set up these two people, a man and a woman she both knew, and they went out for coffee, and he got there first, and he got a cup of coffee, and he was drinking, and she came and she sat down, and he just sat there like he didn't say, oh, okay, what would you like? Can I get you something? No, because you see, so to her, it's like, what is this guy like? That doesn't he know how to make a woman feel special? But I know to him, he was thinking, well, I'm showing I believe in equality. I went and got my own coffee. So can you. Well, that was obviously the last date, the only date. But it's like we hear all these things, and really this idea like a man, being a gentleman. Oh no, like I get men don't even open a car door for a woman because he's afraid that she's going to say, what do you think? I can't open my own car door.
I've come across both those situations, and it's not even in a romantic sense. It's just, how I was raised. There's a certain level of chivalry and respect that you give. But what I think has happened is there's a certain subset of men who are just douchey. And because those men were douchey, and we have a history of women's oppression, going back to women's suffrage in the 1920s, and before that, on up to the 1960s with the Civil Rights Act. But I think what has happened is all men are guilty of something that is perpetrated by a group of men. So it's just like in a family. It's like you got one brother who's bad, one brother who's just a complete moron, and everyone thinks the rest of the family are the same way, when it's just you got this one seed who's just... And to me, I'm wondering how this is going to play out in the future generations as far as family, as far as children, as far as how people are going to interact, because there are going to be couples who are going to come out of this. It just happens.
You're exactly right. I mean, so I know so many women who are like 40s, 50s, they're attractive, successful women, and they tell me they can't find a decent guy because, they want a guy who's like the rock that they can lean on, like a tower of strength. They don't want a guy who's like always telling them his feelings. Like, yeah, occasionally if you're upset about something, you share it with your partner. But if you come home every day and say, oh, my boss was mean to me, it's like, hey, they don't want to hear this because they want to know that you're going to be strong enough to stand up for them. So if you can't even stand up for yourself, it really doesn't look good. And so it's like today's one foregoing today's men because they don't act like men. They really want a man who's strong, who takes charge, who shows a share of leadership. It's not about controlling. Nobody wants somebody controlling. Controlling is being abusive. Leadership is like doing what's good for your family and making sacrifices and taking responsibility for what's going on. They really want that. And so they can't find that. But then you have these situations where people do get married and the man thinks, well, she knows more about raising kids and running the home, and I'll just bring in money. And like, there's all these problems in a home, like there is in every home.
Yeah.
And, the man thinks, well, let her deal with it because that's her job. And I'll just bring in the money. And then, but she's so fed up because she thinks, well, this guy's leaving everything to me. And even guys will say, and this is so common, I think, well, I come home, whatever I say, what do you want me to do? I'll do whatever you tell me to do. And he thinks, well, I'm being an involved father. Well, no, he's being a nanny. Like a nanny, you can tell what to do and she'll do it. That's her job. But she really wants you to step forward to this. And I coach a lot of guys, right? And I tell them, there's a situation, you're blaming it on your wife because she's not solving it. You know what? It's your job to solve it. You're the father. She's not solving it. Well, it's your job to step forward and research, find a solution, go on the internet, talk to a professional, whatever the situation is. Like, think about, well, what can I do to solve this problem? And then I tell them, okay, so maybe you found what you think is a good solution. Use your judgment. Is this something you should talk to your wife first before you do it? Or is it something she probably just wants you to deal with on your own? step forward and do it, and keep doing that, and you will be her hero. She doesn't want a guy who comes home and says, "What should I do?" Whatever, just tell me what to do. I'll do it. And then these guys, when the wife says we don't do enough at home, he says, "What, I'm doing so much. I do."
Yeah.
It's not showing your share of leadership, and that's why a lot of women are just frustrated today, because men, it's like you're saying, they're tiptoeing around. They don't want to show leadership. They don't want to be accused of being toxic or being controlling, and so they're going to the other extreme and just being a nanny.
Yeah, what I'm also witnessing, because I'm really paying attention to how relationships are playing out, because I came from a relationship that we were really immature. My first marriage, we were just immature. And I married someone who is emotionally really intelligent, great at communication, and stating like, this is what I'm looking for. And I'm like, okay. And this is what I'm looking for. And we dialogue. And here's the one thing that we understand intrinsically between my wife and I. She is fabulous. We understand that we are built off two different sets of software. We are literally built off two separate forms of software. And we have to communicate differently, which means I realize that sometimes I have to ask her, what do you mean? And I have to humble myself and go, I don't understand what you're saying. And she'll say, I said it plainly. I'm like, that makes no sense to me. Can you explain it to me in a way that I can understand it as a guy? Think of me as a Neanderthal and you are a fairy. We have two different things. So please explain it to me. And she goes, oh, that makes sense. And then she'll do the exact same thing to me. Is this exactly what you meant? I'm like, yes. Okay. Because we know that when we get these looks at each other, like I'll say something and she looks at me and I go, she didn't get what I meant. Or she doesn't understand the why. And that dialogue is not open anymore.
What you're saying is very true and very common. I've seen a lot of situations where really men they're talking one language, women are talking the other language, and they really don't understand what the other person is saying. It's like what I was just saying. Like before, when a woman says, you're not doing enough at home, and the man says, well, but I do this. I give the kids baths. I take out the garbage, all these things. But what she's really saying is you're not showing your share of leadership at home. And I mean, there's so many things. And, one of the interesting things I found in my the bit of research I've done is when you ask a woman, what's the most important thing a man wants from his wife? The answer always, the first answer always is sex. And I said, well, what's more important? Yeah, a man wants sex, but what's more important? He really wants his wife to be his partner, to help him achieve the goals he has for his family.
Yep.
And that's right. See, every man knows that. You could ask every man, what do you want from a wife? I said, I want a partner who's going to be with me through thick and thin, and we're going to go out in the world and take it on and achieve our goals. That's the most important thing. Is that I don't think a woman realizes just how important that is to a man, and so that's something you need to communicate, because really that's what he wants more than anything. Like it's just like, communication, talk to each other, explain to each other really what's important and what you mean.
Yeah.
When you say I want a partner, it's like, yeah, I want a partner in bed too. Yes. But it's much more than that.
That does make sense, especially because we know that when you have your honeymoon phase, and your honeymoon phase is a lot of physical, because there's a physical attraction there, and that's usually what brings people together. But then after a while, that attraction kind of wears off, and you really have to get down to the brass tacks of your personality. And then sometimes you start to see, because you were clouded by this drug, the love drug, you're like, this person's not what I thought it was. And then people start to retract because they're comfortable with having someone as well. But, usually those relationships, they have their own thing to work out. But it was just starting to frighten me, the instances that were cropping up in the media. And I don't even pay attention to media that much, But a lot of this is driven from that nature, because I know that women are very much empowered. They're growing in their empowerment. They're doing a lot of business. They're making a lot of strides throughout the world, and they have a lot of influence. But it seems like the pendulum is swinging. If someone's coming up, someone has to go down. And I'm very afraid, because I know there's some really good guys out here who are tiptoeing and suffering because of it. But let me digress a little bit. I have spoken with a cadre of women in my life. Those ones who are over 40, they're like, look, like you said, I just want to find someone that I can hang out with, that can be with me, and can kind of be my complement. Like, I'm not asking for a whole lot. Just give me a man who's doesn't have more baggage than me. And a lot of the times I see some things that are happening with younger women. And my wife said this to me. She was like, sweetie, a lot of this is going to happen when you don't have a lot of struggle. You find problems in your life to focus upon. I was like, ooh, that's a good one. That's a really good one. But let's get back to your point in your book. What was the research that you did to gather the data for men and women, a point of view?
Well, what I found, the book really reflected my own journey of trying to find answers after, a failed marriage. And you talk to all these people, you go to counseling, and nobody really seemed to have any answers. And it's really what the book is there's really a lot of wisdom out there that's been written over the centuries for men on how to have a successful relationship with a woman. And what's happened in this generation is we've lost that all for a variety of reasons. One is a lot of men grow up without fathers. The media, like television, portray men as incapable buffoons. And they go to school. Most teachers are women. A lot of men don't grow up with the male role models that they had in the past, where a father was an example of how to be a father and how to be a husband. You watched your father, you watch him, how kind of husband he was to your mother, and you learn from that. And really the idea is in the book, and it's fascinating to see the response I get, because like a lot of men, it's like, wow, no one ever told me this. This is all new. Wow. I just had a comment on Amazon saying, I wish I had read this book 10 years ago. I'd still be married. But it's really, it's like, so these ideas, like I didn't make them up. These are just ideas I found in writings over the centuries. Like there's so much wisdom. Like whenever I read something, I said, wow, I wish I had known that. It just blew me away. It's just like, wow, the book's not a religious book, but you think back to the story of Adam and Eve. Like this is one story, I read it. When you're looking for advice on marriage and you're reading the story of Adam and Eve, and they're in the Garden of Eden. They're commanded not to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and Eve eats it, and she pressures Adam to eat it, and he gives in and he eats it, and then God says to him, "Did you eat the fruit that I commanded you not to eat?" And what does he do? He blames his wife. And I said, "Wow, I did that. That's what I did. That's what everybody else I know is doing. Like all these men just blaming their wives. It's like nobody's taking responsibility." He said, "You gave in. She pressured you. You gave in. You knew it was wrong. Yep. You gave in, and now you're blaming her." It's like, wow, nothing has changed. So it's like, I think when you blame your wife for something that she pressured you to do, and you gave in even though you knew it was wrong, and then you blame her, you think that makes her feel affection for you? It turns her right off.
One of the things I recently discovered is that in relationships, love is actually a new contributor or a new kind of goal within the relationship. Prior to the 19th century, a lot of it was for status, a lot of it was for power, a lot of it was for networking. The idea of marriage and the most popular forms of it were in high society. One country married someone from another country so they wouldn't tear each other apart.
Right.
Or a king or a high family in a society would marry a certain level. They wouldn't just go marry someone who just worked in the grocery store. They want to marry someone of equal status so they can maintain their network and their worth. And then in the 20th century, with the advent of media, which has affected our relationships quite a bit, it started to give us a narrative of how we should approach a relationship, as well as some of the writings of the early 19th century as well. And I think that's affecting us overall in this kind of thing, because when anything happens, because we're in this 24/7 news cycle, and there's not that much news to be 24 hours a day, the least little thing that happens, it blows up, and it affects the consciousness of everyone. But I'm just worried about, I don't mind, most of my children are female and I have one son, and I'm just telling him, I'm like, you got to just slow down and you got to develop. But he has a good role model between my wife and I, so he can see like how we talk, how we work things out, and hopefully that he will look for someone who can communicate equally. But do you think of a lot of it is just, I don't know. I'm kind of miffed.
No, I know what you're talking about. This whole idea of the love marriage, the romantic marriage. It is a relatively, there's a lot have been written about this and how it's a relatively recent phenomenon that for centuries, this wasn't why people got married. It's just really in the past century that, there's, you fall in love. It was like these romantic novels. So you fall in love with this person and you want this love to continue and your whole life. And then when it sort of fades away, because inevitably it does, then you say, oh, well, maybe I married the wrong person. Well, and there's all these challenges, if you have kids, it could be overwhelming, like how much work it is, how exhausting it is. And suddenly you realize, well, I must have married the wrong person, because I don't feel these surges of love that I used to feel. Yeah, that's the problem a lot of today is like people need to realize, this is reality. Marriage is really about the personal growth that comes from learning how to deal with another person who is so different than you. And really, and there's challenges. Really, when you think about it, I look at my own family and, people around me, the people who have the strongest marriages are not people who had no challenges in their marriages. They're people who had a lot of challenges, and yet they stuck together and they took them on together and they overcame them. And it's like, wow, when I said, wow, I have this partner who stood by me through this incredible challenge. Wow, I love her, or I love him. That's true love. I mean, this romantic, feeling of, passion. I mean, it's great for the romance novels, but we all know it doesn't last. And if you're expecting it to last and it's faded away, and you think, well, I married the wrong person, you shouldn't have gotten married in the first place.
Yeah, I know we're talking about marriage, but the thing that's on the table, the elephant that's in the room, is people have to get to a point where they can get married. They have to be a couple first. And that's the challenge, is if men are retracting from a certain segment, and we know statistically that women outnumber men, and available men, which means those men who are those good guys, those guys who are up for the challenge, ready for the challenge, wanting to move forward with that, will that cause some problems in the here in the near future, because they're getting thrown out with, they're the baby getting thrown out with the bathwater. That's what I'm worried about in this society, that the men who should be, or who naturally would be good fits for women, are scared, and I'm going to use the word scared, are scared into submission because they don't want to jeopardize their career. They don't want to jeopardize their reputation. They don't want to jeopardize their whole being because they were perceived wrong. And with social media, literally a person can say something about someone and everybody knows it. Their entire circle has heard this, and they're like, whoa. And the presumption of innocence is not a parent. You're presumed guilty.
Right. No, what you're saying is so true, and it's tragic. And you have fellows who don't want to get married. They said, "Well, I saw what happened to my father when my parents got divorced. How he was destroyed and lost everything. His kids, became like a visitor to his children's lives." It's we as a society, if we want to encourage marriage, we want to encourage people to get married, and people who are getting divorced have to be treated, fairly. Yeah, I've heard that. People, they say they saw what happened. They see what's happening, and then with all these, allegations that are, the ones that are true, okay, but the ones that are not true, and even when they're proven not true, they still stay with the person because they figure, well, they just couldn't prove it or something. Who needs it? Like who, even like these people, public officials that step forward and then all these allegations are made against them. If they're true, fine. But if they're not true, it's like, hey, why put yourself through this? It's what you're saying is so true. And it's something's got to be done to really to protect families from this. I don't know. Like it's.
Yeah,
what do you think is the answer? It's,
I think it requires some maturity from the older men generation, and older women too. It requires the younger generation speaking with their mentors about these scenarios. Because you're right, there are a lot of men who don't understand what the role of a man is. You can see it. I mean, there's this one thing, which is the red pill movement, which is men saying, that they're starting to have toxic views about women because they have seen exactly what you said. They've seen what it's done to their friends, a relationship has done to their friends, or the demise of a relationship has done to their parent or friend, and they're just like, I'm done. And what they are doing is they're just going after their carnal satisfaction, which is, I'm going to limit this to just what I need, and everything else is off the table. And they're pretty honest about it too. And a lot of women aren't believing them. And then when they carry out this, they're like, what happened? And they're like, I told you what I was going to do. You just didn't believe me. Also, there's the men going their own way, which is part of that red pill scenario. And when you start to see these little things crop up, they grow, especially with the internet. So I'm really scared in the future of our country, because it seems to be predominantly here, because we're so diverse, that it can grow and it can spread. And one thing I know about a nation, whenever somebody was conquered, the first thing they did was take out the men. And when you take out the men, or the men don't care, we're vulnerable. Our families are vulnerable. Our nation is vulnerable. Our infrastructure is vulnerable, because now you have demasculated the men. And the same thing with, like, everybody gets a trophy. Very similar thing. Everybody doesn't just go for what they own. But, I'm so glad that you offered up to have this, because I had a guest on yesterday or a couple of days ago, and we talked about it from the feminine perspective. I didn't want it to just be a one-sided view. Because most of the people I were looking at were women, and then you showed up, and I was very appreciative the fact that we could dialogue about this. So I want to thank you for that. And where can they get the book?
Okay, the book, Being the Strong Man a Woman Wants, Timeless Wisdom on Being a Man, is available on Amazon as a paperback and an ebook, and it's also an ebook on iBooks and Kobo. And you can get it in bookstores too. You can ask them to order it, but probably the fastest way is just to go to Amazon. They'll get it to you these days really fast. And if you want to contact me, my website is www.elliotkatz.com, and Elliot is spelled ELLIOTT, 2 T's, KATZ.com. And if you read the book or you have any questions, please email me. My goal is to change the men of the world so there'll be less divorce and less kids from broken homes. And that's my mission. And the feedback I've gotten from the book is, it's worth it. It's a lot cheaper than getting divorced. and a lot of people have written back and said, yeah, like there are things they just didn't know. And it's really clarified things, and it's really improved their marriage. So give it a shot, because really, your kids don't want to be from a broken home. Believe me.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, remember this. We all only see the world through our own eyes. Honestly, you have to recognize the fact that your perception is how you live. But we live in a world where there are perceptions outside of us, and sometimes we have to have empathy so that we can try to see the world from another perspective. Take your eyeballs out and face them back at you and see how you could be perceived. We have to open ourselves up. We are so dynamic. We're spiritual beings having a physical experience. And the physical experience is something new because it limits our perception. When we're spiritual, we are connected to everything. But when we're physical, we have limitations. Those limitations can be our demise, or they can actually, if we use them correctly, can help us to expand. So when you meet someone, give them a break and ask them what their actual meaning is, what their intent is, and judge by how they act. Put those two together and form a relationship. Till next time, love you all. Peace.